Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the all-new 2022 Ram 3500, and there are potentially some massive changes for the truck. So in the first part of the video, we're going to go over those potentially massive changes, then we're going to get into why this matters, and then finally we're going to cap things off with whether or not you should look into purchasing a 2022 Ram 3500. With all that being said, let's get straight into the video. So let's get into these changes that are happening for 2022 with the Ram 3500. First off, the changes that are a little bit more on the confirmed side are the same changes that are happening to the 1500. So that new cabin air filtration system that Ram is putting in the 1500, it sounds like they're also going to put that in the 2500 and the 3500. It's kind of something that Ram decided to do because of everything that happened with COVID. Now, aside from that, they're also potentially making some changes to the grille designs with some of the packages on the 1500, and they'll probably carry that to the heavy duty trucks as well. Again, that's kind of like more on the confirmed side. Now, a little bit more on the less so confirmed side is the best way for me to put it. We might have some changes come to the interior. So if you guys don't know, they released the new body style with the trucks back in 2019. The 1500 got a complete overhaul. Completely new truck, right? New suspension, and it had a completely new cab, completely new interior, everything completely new. Whereas with the heavy duty, it was kind of like the front end of the truck was updated, but then they kept literally like the back seat area, and then the whole back end of the truck, it was pretty much the same as the previous generation. Now, for 2022, it sounds like they might actually finally update that, which would be a massive change. They might make some tweaks to, again, the suspension and the shocks, and actually do something with the whole back end of the truck rather than just having like the front end of the truck revised and the back end not. And so we might actually get a bigger cab for the crew cab with the 2500s and the 3500s, which would definitely be awesome, because if you guys haven't sat in one of the new trucks, if you get in a 1500 crew cab and then you go into a 3500 crew cab, the 1500 has so much more space. Yes, you can still get a mega cab, but there's a lot of people that don't want the mega cab because you cannot get that with a longer bed. And so if they offered the bigger crew cab from the 1500 in the heavy duty truck, then you could get that bigger cab where you can have tons of space in the back, and then you could also still get a long bed. So again, not necessarily confirmed, but that is a potential change. Now, aside from that, the updated version of the high output diesel is still going to be available for the truck for 2022. And I don't want to get these power figures wrong, so let me just make sure that I'm right on this. Okay, so for 2021, they updated the engine to have now 420 horsepower and then 1,075 pound-feet of torque. If you guys don't remember, the original iteration of the high output was at 400 horsepower and then 1,000 pound-feet of torque. For 21, they updated that a little bit, and that's paired with the 6-speed Allison transmission. Now, the standard Cummins engine still has the same 370 horsepower and then 850 pound-feet of torque paired to the 68 RFE. And then in terms of the 6.4 Hemi, that is also going to stay the same, where it's got the 410 horsepower and then 429 pound-feet of torque, and then through the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission. Now, back to the high output Cummins. The other thing that might potentially change, now this is super speculative, unconfirmed, is that they might do something with Allison. Now, this has been talked about for years, right? Back in the day when Ram was building the 5.9 liter Cummins, people talked about it all the time. They're like, man, this is such a good engine, but the automatic transmission is horrible. It's not that reliable, right? Everyone knows that. If you get a 5.9, you try to get one with a manual transmission, because if you get one with an automatic, it's only a matter of time before that thing goes. And so people back then were like, if we could just have this with the Allison, because the Allison back in that time was super reliable, super robust, right? That transmission just, it's like indestructible basically. And so people always talk about pairing them together, and that conversation has continued into the modern day. And so now that Chevy has the new 10-speed Allison in their truck, people have talked about obviously putting that transmission in the Ram. And here's what I have to say is probably not going to happen. They're probably still going to stick with the Allison, but a lot of people are talking about it, and so there is that potential. We don't have a confirmed transmission for 2022. Again, it'll probably be the Allison, but there is a chance that Ram might finally go to the quote-unquote dark side and use the Allison transmission, finally admit defeat, that they were wrong about transmissions, that they should have done that all along. But we'll see what happens there, but those are pretty much the major changes that we have there, you know, on the more confirmed side and then on the more speculative side for the 3500. Let's talk about why this is of such important significance with the changes coming to the 3500. First off, the minor changes, not really all that important, right? The cabin air filtration system and the grills and all that kind of stuff, whatever. We'll just throw it to the side. Now, the new potential cab configuration, that is massively important. The reason that's massively important is right now, if you go and get a new Ford heavy duty or a Chevy heavy duty, then you get a really large spacious cab. If you get into the Ram crew cab, it's not nearly as big. Now the Mega Cab, yes, it has similar amounts of space, but the problem with the Mega Cab is one, you can't get it with the long bed, and two, it actually decreases the payload of the Ram 2500 and the 3500, and so you're actually losing some usability with the truck by going for the Mega Cab. And so it's cool, but right, it kind of defeats the purpose of parts of the truck. And again, the fact you can't get a long bed is a big issue for some people. And so if they give the new 3500 the bigger cab from the new 1500, then it'll finally have a cab that can compete with Ford and can compete with Chevy, that still can come with a long bed and isn't going to completely destroy the payload of the truck. And so that would be of huge significance, and I'm sure it would pull some buyers to go back onto the Ram side if space was something that was extremely important to them. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing obviously has to do with the powertrain and the transmission, all that kind of stuff. So first off, again, I think they're just going to carry the same power figures into 2022. So the update they did with the high output where they bumped it up to 420 horsepower and 1,075 pound-feet of torque, I think that's going to continue into 2022. Unless Ford answers back and has something ridiculous, which, I mean, let's be honest, Ford probably will do that, right? Right now, the power stroke is 475 horsepower, so it still has more horsepower than the Ram, but the torque is 1,050, and so maybe Ford's going to come back at, you know, probably 1,100, right? And then Ram will be like, okay, 1125, and then it'll just keep going back indefinitely and until the trucks have so much torque that I don't know, it's just going to be completely unusable. But aside from that, right, the big thing we talked about was the potential for Ram to finally integrate the Allison transmission with the high output diesel. And here's what I'd have to say. This would probably be the most significant change for the 3500 in its entire history, just for the Ram lineup, right? Maybe they'll also use that transmission in the 2500, because what they could potentially do, right, is instead of having this differentiation where you've got the 68 RFE and you've got the 6-speed Allison, maybe they just use the Allison for every single every single output of the diesel engine. So if you get the lower output diesel engine, you still get the 10-speed. If you get the higher output, you still get the 10-speed, because I'm pretty sure that transmission can still hold quite a bit of torque and power. So I'm sure it would be able to be engineered with both of the powertrains. Obviously with the lower one, it can definitely handle that, because right now that 10-speed in the Silverado handles, it's like, what, 910 pound-feet of torque and then 440 horsepower. So it handles more torque and more horsepower than what the lower output version of the Cummins has. So definitely can handle that. Can it handle the extra torque that the high output has? I don't know, I'm not an engineer, but I'm sure that they could make it work. Aside from that, the reason that this would be just so significant is it would be Ram finally admitting defeat to the Allison, right? Again, for the longest time, people have been back and forth and talking about how the Cummins is like the best engine ever, but then the transmission sucks. And then, right, you've got the Duramax, which people love, but the thing that they really love about the Chevys has been the Allison transmission. People have always talked about how those two need to be married together, and Ram has spent so much time working with companies to develop transmissions to try to just get out of that, right? They're like, okay, you know what, we know the Allison's cool, but we've got this Allison transmission that is just as reliable, just as robust, and it is just as good as the Allison, right? Ram is constantly trying to basically integrate a transmission into their truck that is just as good as the Allison, so that they can kind of run away from that. But again, that's pretty much what that would be, is it would be them finally, you know, throwing in the white flag and saying, you know what, we should have done this all along. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of truck people would absolutely love that. Now, again, do I think they're actually going to do it? Probably not. It would be cool. They're probably not going to do it. But Only time will tell. I want you guys to let me know in the comment section below what you think they'll end up doing on that front. And now let's get into whether or not you should look into purchasing a 2022 Ram 3500. So first off, here's what I have to say. If they don't do any of these updates that I talked about, if they don't increase the cab size, and if they don't change anything with the powertrain, then you're pretty much going to be getting the same truck that you're getting in 2021, just with a new model year, right? That would be the only difference. Maybe, again, the grille will change a little bit. Maybe there will be some different exterior colors, but it'll be pretty minor from a change perspective. And so unless you're like super specific on the specification that you want with the truck, and there's not a truck out there you can find, I'd recommend just get a 21 if you can find one right now. And other than that, there's really no point in waiting. But if they do make these big changes, then it could potentially very well be worth it, especially considering the cab configuration. I think that's the most likely to happen. The transmission, I mean, that one, again, probably not, but the cab configuration, if that change happens, I definitely think it's worth it because that larger cab is so much more usable. And that's going to sum things up for our video on the changes that are coming to the 2022 Ram 3500. As always, if you're stopping for the first time, I'd really appreciate if you'd subscribe, comment down below what you think, and if you do feel like my videos are of value to you, I'm going to include a link to my Patreon in the description down below. I'd really appreciate your support over there. I'll see you guys.